Well, good morning. Oh my goodness. It is so good to see all of you this morning. It's been over 3 months, and I know we've met online, but we are together. This reminds me of this scripture in Psalm 133. It says, how blessed it is for us to dwell in unity and to be together. That's a wonderful thing. And if there's anything that this time in the last 3 months has taught me personally, is just to appreciate us coming together as a family, as a congregation, and we get that privilege again. So thank you for being here this morning. Again, for some of you that might be new, my name is Sean Lopez, one of the worship leaders here. And on stage, I have Colin here, who's on staff, playing the cajon, busting out the cajon this morning. It's been sitting there with the spiders the last 2 years. And then we heard our new contemporary worship leader, Brian, who you've seen online as well, joining us. And then we're going to have some of our worship team members come in and be a part of this as the weeks move on, okay? So we just have a kind of a thin group, but we want to lead you in worship this morning, and we're going to have Brian lead this. So if you could stand, is it all right to say we can stand, right? We're not bound in that way. We can stand up, raise your hands, be free, just enjoy this service this morning. Thank you for being here as Brian leads us in how great thou art, how great you are. I want you to proclaim that this morning, okay?
Let's sing it together. Oh, Lord, my God, when I in awesome wonder consider all the worlds thy hands have made, I see the stars, I see the stars, I hear the rolling thunder, thy power throughout the universe displayed. All right, let's lift it up together. Then sings my soul, then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. And sings my soul, and sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Oh, how great thou art. That God his Son not sparing, sent him to die. I scarce can take it in. And on the cross, there on the cross, my burdens gladly bearing, he bled and died to take away my sin. Let's lift it up together, come on. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Oh, how great thou art. Oh, when Christ shall come, when Christ shall come, with shout of acclamation, and take me home, what joy shall fill my heart. Then I shall bow with humble adoration great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great thou art. How great thou art. Oh, how great you are. How great thou art. Oh, how great thou art. How great thou art. Oh, one last time. Come on, how great. How great thou art. Oh. Amen. You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship. Sing that again. You are here. You are here, moving in our midst. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you. As you are. Waymaker, miracle work, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are waymaker, miracle work, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. You are here, touching every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, healing every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, turning lives around. I worship you. I worship you. You are here, mending every heart. I worship you. I worship you. You are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Oh, you are waymaker, miracle worker, promise keeper, light in the darkness. My God, that is who you are. Oh, that is who you are. And that is who you are. And that is who you are. That is who you are. That is who you are. Waymaker, that is who you are. Promise keeper, that is who you are. My God, that is who you are. And that is who you are. That is who you are. And that is who you are. And that is who you are. Oh.
This morning, for some of you, if you feel comfortable continuing to stand or you want to sit down, feel free to do whatever, okay? Don't feel obligated to just continue to worship him as Brian continues on. We're going to sing this great hymn together. Jesus paid it all.
I hear the Savior, come on, sing. And I hear the Savior say, thy strength indeed is small. Child of weakness, watch and pray. Find in me thine all in all. Jesus paid it all. Jesus paid it all. All to him I owe. Sin had left a crimson stain. He washed it white as snow. Lord, now indeed, come on, sing. And Lord, now indeed I find thy power in thine alone can change the leper's spots and melt the heart of stone. Jesus paid it all. Jesus paid it all to him I owe. Sin had left a crimson stain. He washed it white as snow. In him complete, Jesus died my soul to save. Come on, lift it up. My lips shall still repeat. Jesus paid it all. Jesus paid it all to him I owe. Sin had left a crimson stain. He washed it white as snow. Sing oh praise. Oh, praise the one who paid my debt and raised his life up from the dead. Oh, praise the one who paid my debt and raised his life up from the dead. Oh, praise the one who paid my debt and raised his life up from the dead. Oh, praise the one who paid my debt and raised his life up from the dead. Jesus. Lord, we stand in awe this morning of your greatness, of your love, the sacrifice you made. You paid it all. Let's sing that one last time. Jesus paid it all to him I owe. Sin had left a crimson stain. He washed it white as snow. Sin had left. Sin had left a crimson stain. He washed it white as snow. He washed.
beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him, nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it.
It is good to have everybody here, old, new, young, and if you're here with us for the first time, we're really glad that you're our guests, and it is a blessing to have you here with us. You know, as we think about our world and as we see all the things that are going on around us, it's been a confusing, it's been a crazy, it's been an interesting time, and I think that we all would readily admit that. And one of the things that I think is probably present here today, you know, we have about 80 to 100 people here today, so a smaller crowd than normal, but I'm glad to see those that could come out. But if there's 80 to 100 people in this room here today, we probably have about 80 to 100 opinions about exactly what coronavirus is, what it means, how should we handle it, what we should do about it. And so I just want to encourage you to take all of that that's going on in our minds and our hearts, if it's still there, and all the stuff that we've been just seeing on the news throughout the last week or two, when we're seeing the rioting, we're seeing the protests, we see the racial strife, the tension in this country. It's so easy to look at all of that and to really come out of the last few months of what we've come out of and to have sort of a skewed perspective. We can feel like we're reeling a little bit. We can feel like maybe really there's not a king on the throne. But there is a king on the throne, and his name is Jesus. He is Jesus Christ, the Messiah, the anointed King of God. And we're going to say here in just a moment, right before we go into the sermon time, we're just going to say the Lord's Prayer together. And I hope that as you pray this with me, this will be something that can be faith-inducing, faith-strengthening in your life. Because really this prayer that Jesus taught his disciples to pray is a prayer that kind of encapsulates some of the themes of his ministry and his teaching. But really it's a prayer asking that God would indeed bring his kingdom, his will, and his reign into our lives and into our world. And as we pray this and as we ask God for this and as we live this out, we can be lights. We can be little beacons of hope in a world that's really seeming to be out of control. And so I just want to go ahead and have you now pray the Lord's Prayer with me, and then we'll jump into John. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen. Well, it's kind of cool to do that in front of a live audience. I don't know if you guys have, we've had a pretty good amount of engagement with our online services. For me, it's been a little difficult preaching to a camera. I'm a lot more restrained than I like to be. I've been told that I can only move this far this way, this far this way. No dancing is allowed. I can't go off onto wild tangents. So I've been storing this up for 2 or 3 months, so probably about 50, 60 minutes, and we'll just roll through this baby. And no, I'm kidding. I'm joking. We'll keep it very restrained and refined. We're in the era of coronavirus. I want to talk to you like I'm speaking to a camera. So no, it is good to be with you guys. And we're going to jump into the Gospel of John. Like I say, we're going to be in chapter 5, and if you've been following along with us, we've kind of tracked along, and we've seen lots of things already about what Jesus is doing in his ministry. Excuse me. But today we're going to get into this amazing story of this man who's at this pool where he's waiting to be healed. And Jesus is going to ask him a very important question, and it's a very important question for our lives as well, so we're going to jump in. But, you know, I was thinking about this idea, this question that Jesus is going to ask later on to this man about, do you want to get well? And there's a whole background behind that. We'll talk more about that. But, you know, I was thinking there's a lot of areas where we might want to, quote-unquote, get well in our lives, but we kind of all have these areas, these certain things that are kind of cultural, where we kind of want to get well, but we really don't want to try very hard to do it. And so one of the areas that I think about that is New Year's resolutions, and it's dieting. Okay, so in America, diets and dieting are almost a national obsession, and it's big, big business. So a February 2019 article in BusinessWire.com stated that the U.S. weight loss industry is worth $72 billion a year in weight loss products, pills, gimmicks, diets, whatever. But the fact of the matter is that even though we diet a lot, probably I don't think anyone in this room, except for the kids, hopefully, but there's probably not anyone in this room that hasn't dieted or been on a diet of some kind at least one point or another. My wife is a huge student of food and of health, and so we have been on many, not fads, but we have been on many different types of eating programs through the years, so that's something that's kind of an American deal. But we have trouble sticking with it. We're really not that committed, and these slides kind of point that out. So the first one here is basically diet day one, and it's a lady standing in front of the refrigerator. She says, "I removed all of the unhealthy food from the house. It was delicious." That's how I like to kick off a diet. I'm like, "Oh, I'm ready to lose some weight, so I better eat all those bags of chips and a block of cheese. I won't be able to go to the bathroom for a week, but hey, it was worth it." So that's diet day one. So we're sometimes a little bit hard. It's hard for us to commit. So this next one spoke to me a little bit too. This lady's reading a book. She said, "Fact, bananas are 75% water and 100% not chocolate." And so things that are healthy, sometimes we don't like them as well and they don't taste as good. This next one here I thought was kind of funny. It's a little pie chart. The darker shaded thing is the light shade is the people who eat healthy, balanced meals. The darker shade is the people who wish that was really pie. And I experience that sometimes when I'm on a diet as well. And the problem, I think, is and was stated very succinctly by he's dead now, but the former actor and director Orson Welles. And he said this. He said, "My doctor told me to stop having intimate dinners for 4 unless there were 3 other people with me." And so a lot of times we overeat and, we go on a diet, but we don't really go on a diet because we don't like it. I'm that way. I'll do really well eating salads and different things for a week, and then the McDouble just calls my name. I'm driving by the Golden Arches, and I just want that processed meat, because it's just so good. So often there are many things in our lives where we really want to achieve something or we want to have something, but what we really want is we want the result. But we don't want to actually live in a posture that allows us to pursue that thing. And that's kind of something that I see in America with diets. And so this might be a funny way to start out thinking about this idea of do you want to get well, but I think it's a good segue into that. Jesus is going to ask a question of a man, and it's a question for our lives as well. And we're going to talk about this, but he's going to ask him, do you want to get well? And this question that Jesus asked him isn't about diets. It's not about physical health. It's about, do you really want to get well deep in the core of who you are? Do you want your life transformed or not? It's one of the most critical questions that we can consider in our lives. And we're going to jump right into that today as we go into John chapter 5. So let's look at John chapter 5, verses 1 through 4. So we've seen lots of things. We've seen that Jesus is the Word. He's the Logos. He's God in the flesh. He's come to reveal to us perfectly the Father and who the Father is. He's the perfect expression of God. He is, in fact, God. And so he's been walking around. He's been gathering disciples to himself. We found out that he's the stairway to heaven. He's the way to heaven. He has turned water into wine. He's shown us that he is the Lord of quality. He wants good things for our spiritual life and for our physical life. He has been walking through and encountering lots of different people. He had a conversation with Nicodemus. We found out that we need to be born again. He has shown and talked to the Samaritan woman and to others, and they have found that he's the living water. He's the one who can give life. Well, now Jesus is back down in Jerusalem. He's been up in Galilee, and in chapter 5, he's back down in Jerusalem. We've seen all these things. Now we're going to get into this critical conversation. So let's look at verse 1. It says, "Sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish festivals. Now there is in Jerusalem, near the sheep gate, a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, and the paralyzed." And then, I don't know how your Bible does it. My Bible basically doesn't have verse 4. It puts it down in the notes because it's a disputed text. But I'll just read that, verse 4. It says, basically, "These people waited for the moving of the waters. From time to time, an angel of the Lord would come down and stir up the waters. The first one into the pool after each such disturbance would be cured of whatever disease they had." So we're seeing here a strange phenomenon. We're seeing a really kind of an interesting thing that's happening in Jerusalem. There's this pool. There's a lot of sick people there, people that are lame, people that maybe can't see, maybe they've got, a deformation, a defect, maybe they've got a disease, and they're all hanging out around this pool. And evidently, as the story goes, there's an angel or something stirs the waters, and if you can just make it down to the water, you can be A-okay. And so this is a really, really interesting way that people are looking for healing. And I think it's also very interesting that Jesus goes to this place where people are looking for healing, and he's going to speak to healing on a deep level. He's going to speak to this man, and we're going to see that in a moment. Now, I want to do a couple of quick things here. In verse 2, you'll notice that it says, "Now there is in Jerusalem near the sheep gate a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades." If you look at the next slide that's going to be coming up, this is a picture, actually, of the excavation of Bethesda, of this pool. And the reason I want to point this out is because I just want you, I try to pepper these things in every so often, because I want you to know the Bible that we hold and that we read and that we dig into is a Bible you can trust. It's a word you can trust. For years and years and years, scholars faulted John and said that his gospel was inaccurate because certain things he mentioned they hadn't discovered yet. Bethesda, this pool, was one of those things. And yet, lo and behold, within the last 10, 15, 20 years, they found and they have excavated this pool. It was right where the Bible says it was. And I want you to know that routinely this happens in scholarship, and it happens with people that are skeptics against the Bible. You'll have a skeptic, you'll have a scholar, you'll have somebody who says, you know what, the Bible's just not trustworthy because we didn't find this, or this isn't true. And lo and behold, archaeology and study always ends up giving us greater confidence in this text. And so that's something that we see here. But we see this pool, Jesus is going there, and people are looking for healing. And into this odd scene comes the great healer, Jesus. And he asks the most important of questions, and he's going to talk to this man. So let's pick it back up in verse 5. So there's everybody there looking for healing. Verse 5, "One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, 'Do you want to get well?'" Do you want to get well? It seems almost like a mean question in a way. I mean, here's this poor guy laying there, an invalid. Of course he wants to go get well, right? He's by this pool. He's there trying to get into this healing water. And yet he's been in there for 38 years. 38 years coming to this pool, never able to get down to the water. And Jesus asks him a very, very important question. Do you want to get well? Do you really want to be healed? Or do you just want to stay stuck where you are? And this is a question on the surface. All the questions that Jesus asks have a point on the surface, but when we dig down below them, there's a much more profound point to be made. But it's a point on the surface, or a question on the surface about, does this guy really want to walk, or does he just kind of want to be in the state he's in and just go the easy route? But below the surface, it's much deeper than that, because we're going to find out later that evidently this guy, even though he's an invalid, he's got a sin problem. Lo and behold, every one of us has a sin problem. And Jesus is going to talk to him about that later. But now he asks him, do you want to be well? This is a critical, critical question for this man. And it's also a critical question for us. Do we want the benefits of Jesus, or do we really want Jesus? Because if we really want Jesus, then he's going to come in and he's going to actually start doing some major renovation in our hearts and in our lives. And so one of the most important questions we need to ask ourselves is, do we really want that? Do we really want the healing that Jesus offers? Well, let's jump in and let's read through verses 8 through 15. Let's kind of follow out here. We'll actually pick it back up in verse 7. So Jesus says, do you want to get well? Verse 7, here's what the man replied. "Sir, I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I am trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me." Then Jesus said to him, "All right, let's just bypass the pool." He didn't say that, but that's what he's thinking. And he says, "Get up, pick up your mat and walk." At once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. So evidently this guy, he had just been stuck. He didn't have anybody to help him. He didn't have anybody to take him down to the pool. That wasn't really the answer anyways. And Jesus asks him this important question, and the man responds, "Yeah, I want to get well. I just can't get to the water." And Jesus says, "Well, guess what? the living water is right here in front of you. Pick up your mat and walk. And so the man does. Let's keep going. Verse 9, at once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. The day on which this took place was a Sabbath. So this is a Saturday. It's a holy day in Judaism. It's a day of rest, a day when no work is supposed to happen. And so the Jewish leaders said to the man who had been healed, "It is the Sabbath. The law forbids you to carry your mat." But he replied, "The man who made me well said to me, 'Pick up your mat and walk.' So they asked him, 'Who is this fellow who told you to pick it up and walk?' The man who was healed had no idea who it was, for Jesus had slipped away into the crowd that was there. Later, Jesus found him at the temple and said to him, 'See, you are well again. Stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you.' The man went away and told the Jewish leaders that it was Jesus who had made him well." So this is really, really interesting, and we're going to get into the religious leaders here in just a moment, because their deal is they don't really care about that this guy was hurting. They don't really care that this guy was an invalid. They don't care about this guy at all. They care about their stupid religious Sabbath rule, which isn't even in the Bible. It's their little tradition that they've built up around the Sabbath. And Jesus is going to basically smoke them here in a moment and basically show them that they are going down the wrong path with the way they're thinking about things. So we're going to get to them in a moment. But they're caught up in the outward religiosity of everything. This man is healed, for crying out loud, and these religious leaders, all they can do is say, "You're breaking the Sabbath because you're carrying around your mat." And they want to know who in the world is behind this. And so the man says, "I don't know," but he's going to find out in a moment. But notice what happens when he finds out who it was that healed him. When Jesus comes back to him, he says to him, "See, you are well again. Stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you." Evidently, we're not told the exact connection, but evidently this man, maybe this was in some way, shape, or form a root cause of his illness. Sometimes in the Bible, sin and illness are connected. Just because you're ill doesn't mean you're sinning. That's not good theology, but maybe something that was happening in this guy's life was tied to the fact that he had been sinning. But Jesus says to him, "You're well, you can walk, I've healed you. Now take the freedom that I've given you and walk away from the old man." The Romans used to have something that was quite a disturbing thing that they would do sometimes to captives. And we've got a lot of kids in here, so I won't get too graphic. But they sometimes would take a captive and they actually would put a corpse and tie them to the front of the captive, somebody who had been taken from a conquered army. And they actually would end up causing the death of the person that this was tied to, because they wouldn't remove the corpse and they would be breathing in this stench, probably would be getting sick from some of these things. But also, too, the people would just give up their will to live, and they would perish. It was a horrible thing. And the Romans had all sorts of great tortures, crucifixion, this thing I just mentioned, all sorts of good stuff. They were a cruel people. People can be cruel without God. But the reason I mention this is because this is kind of similar, if you want to picture it this way, of what Jesus is telling this guy. "I have healed you. You can walk now. You don't need to go back to the water. But what you do need to realize is that I've healed you and I've set you free. And so don't walk around with that old corpse of a man tied up in front of you, breathing in that old stench. Stop sinning. Turn around and take the freedom that I've given to you. Don't relapse." The leaders, they want information about Jesus because they want to get him. But Jesus, he's in the business of bringing people freedom and bringing people hope. And he says to this man, there's far worse things that can happen to you, eternal things, if you don't stop sinning. Now, this doesn't mean that we have to be perfect, but Jesus is saying, I've set you free and I've healed you so you can be well. So go and be well and don't get back into your sin. Well, let's finish this up, verses 16 through 18, and look at the religious leaders and look at what Jesus says. So he's healed this man. The religious leaders want to know who this guy was that healed him. He tells them it was Jesus once he finds out who it was. Verse 16. So, because Jesus was doing these things on the Sabbath, the Jewish leaders began to persecute him. In his defense, Jesus said to them, My Father is always at his work to this very day, and I too am working. For this reason, they tried all the more to kill him. Not only was he breaking the Sabbath, but he was even calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God. The religious leaders are worried about externals. Jesus is God in the flesh, and he cares about the Father's work. Jesus is so awesome in so many ways. One of the things I love about Jesus is he blows religious people out of the water. Have you ever been around holier-than-thou people, self-righteous people? I'm sure we all have. Maybe you might even know that you have some tendencies in that direction yourself. How pleasant is it to be around the holier-than-thous, the Pharisees? It's not very pleasant at all, because we know deep down, at least with a lot of those people, they're not really interested in us as people. They're not really interested in our well-being. They're interested in the rules. And some people like rules. Some people are really great at following rules. Jesus would keep certain rules. He didn't actually break the Sabbath. He broke the tradition around the Sabbath. But he's doing it intentionally to make a point that your stupid religious rules are nothing. My Father's work is everything. We look around at this culture, and there's a lot of I haven't preached in front of a crowd in a while, so let me just get those words. There's a lot of irreligiosity. I couldn't even get that one out. There's a lot of people that aren't very religious. I should have just said it that way. But, there's a thing that can happen with us as Christians and believers. And if you're here today and you're not a believer, I hope that you will know that every single person, myself included, that's here today, if they know Jesus, is a sinner saved by grace. And if you don't know Jesus, you can be a sinner saved by grace. We all fall, we all falter. Jesus is about healing people and setting them free. But there's a thing that can sometimes happen when we're in the church for a while. Year, 5 years, 10 years. Some of us in here have grown up in the church and always been in the church. And sometimes I think that we look at the world around us that is very irreligious, and we think to ourselves, or we might even communicate to people, you know what, if you can just go ahead and clean yourself up a little bit, then you can come to Jesus. You can come to church if you just clean. You don't have to wear the nicest clothes, but wear something that's not, look better than the preacher, for crying out loud, when you come to church. But clean yourself up a little bit. If we can just take care of that habit and just kind of knock that off a little bit, if you can just stop chewing and, drinking and cussing and hanging out with the girls that do that stuff, if you just stop doing that stuff, clean up a few things in your life, you'll be A-okay. And the thing is that it's exactly the opposite. God doesn't care about our stupid rules. He doesn't care about the ways that we want people to conform to our standards. He cares about standards, but what he's ultimately after is calling people that are dying and can't walk spiritually or physically, and he wants to call them into life and make them well and free them from sin and bring them hope. And the religious leaders of Jesus' day didn't get that. A lot of us religious people have struggles with that and understanding that even to this day. And yet Jesus says, I've got to be about my Father's work. And so my encouragement is that if you're here today and you know Jesus, let's not be a Pharisee. Let's not get hung up on the rules. Let's just call people to Jesus. And if you're here today and you don't know Jesus, I just want to encourage you that Jesus wants you. What the people that were in Jesus' day did, the religious leaders, they didn't get the message. They just got angrier. They didn't like what he was saying. They didn't like what he was claiming. And ultimately, they're going to kill him for it, and they're already starting to make plans. We need to have softer hearts. So that's a little bit, we're going to stop there for today in our journey through John. The bottom line I really want to get at today as we just finish up is I want to re-ask the question, and I want to ask it for you guys because it's something we have to ask ourselves. Do you want to get well? Do we want to get well? I look around at our culture, and I look around at what's happening with the riots and the protests, and I think we can all agree that what happened to George Floyd was horrific and horrible and a great, great injustice. And peaceful protests, those kind of things are absolutely proper and should be done. But I look at our country sometimes, the way we're divided politically, the things that are happening in the streets, and I think, do we really want to get well as a culture? I don't think so, really. I think a lot of people deep down just want to say, let this baby burn. And my encouragement to us is that we can't fix everything out there in culture. We need to be a part of it to wherever extent God calls us to be a part of it. But we can't fix everything out there in culture. But what we can do is we can be people who come to Jesus daily, moment by moment, and as he asks us, do you want to get well? Justin, do you really want to be free from that? Justin, do you really want to walk in a new way? Justin, do you really want to forgive that person? Justin, do you really want to be different? As the Spirit of God asks us those questions, we need to ask, or we need to answer and consider where we're at. Our culture may be on the precipice, but we as individuals and as couples and as families and as a family of believers can come to Jesus and we can have freedom brought into our lives if we really want to get well. And so really just to close today, I just want to encourage you to do two things. Number one, ask yourself this, think about this, and then act on it. What is the Spirit bringing to your heart and mind? What is it that you might already know? You might say, there's this thing, I know it's been there for a long time. This habit, this sin, this bad way of dealing with people, this root of bitterness, this unforgiveness. Whatever God's stirring up in you, consider that. And then the real question is, will you let Jesus heal you and give you freedom? Because he wants to. If you simply confess that sin, come to him, ask for strength, there may be ups and downs. There is never a straight path as we walk through our spiritual lives. But Jesus will bring freedom, and he will bring healing, and he will bring hope. Will you let Jesus heal you and give you freedom? Consider that this week. Consider that this day. And then the last thing is I just want to encourage you to pray for our world. Because it's quite scary what's going on, honestly, in a lot of ways. We're pretty insulated from it here in Boise, Idaho. But we may not be if it goes deep enough and far enough. And we need to ask that God's Spirit will bring healing, rest, hope, and renewal to our land, and that he will turn many hearts to him, because we need not just reform in this country, we need revival. We need spirits that are set on fire to see Jesus Christ and to see that ultimately all of us, apart from Jesus, whether we're physically incapacitated or not, spiritually we are incapacitated, we are dead, we have no hope, and we need the Spirit to fall on our land and fall on our hearts and draw us to Jesus. And so I just encourage you this week to consider letting Jesus heal you and set you free in those areas that are coming to mind, and praying for our world. And I just want to ask you to pray with me now.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieve. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. Sing it out now. My chains are gone. I've been set free. My God, my Savior has ransomed me. And like a flood, His mercy reigns. Unending love, amazing grace. We've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun. We've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. Chains are gone, I've been set free. My God, my Savior has ransomed me. And like a flood, His mercy reigns. Unending love, amazing grace. My chains are gone, I've been set free. My God, my Savior has ransomed me. And like a flood, His mercy reigns.
We're going to end with a hymn before Pastor Jordan comes up. It says, "Here I am, Lord." God is calling us and sending us out to bring his message of hope. Here I am, Lord. I, the Lord of sea and sky, I have heard my people cry, all who dwell in dark and sin, my hand will save. And I who made the stars of night, I will make their darkness bright. Who will bear my light to them? Whom shall I send? And here I am, Lord, and it is I, Lord. I have heard you calling in the night, and I will go. And if you lead me, I will hold your people in my heart. Let's do that last line together. I will hold your people in my heart.
Well, it's great to be with you this morning. I know some of you, I may be a new face. Hopefully you've seen the videos, but my name's Jordan. I'm one of the new staff with Brian up there. And I'd love to get to know you or your families in the coming weeks. I really look forward to that. I've been working here for 2 weeks, and it's been a lonely, or two months rather, and it's been a little lonely without you guys here. So I look forward to getting to know you guys and your families. You can come and get to know me or Brian. Brian, I've heard, really loves long, lengthy stories about your most recent surgical procedures. So just feel free to tell him any of those stories. He'd love to hear that. But no, we really would like to get to know you and your families anytime in the coming months as we begin to meet together again. And we appreciate your guys' patience in this weird, fluid season that we're in. We know that sometimes it's a little bit difficult to know what to expect, and it has been for us as well. So we want to move forward with wisdom and caution, as well as just grace and confidence in who God is and what he continues to do, even throughout all of this. We know that he is never ceasing. He is always active and always on the move. And so we want to join him still in this season. And hopefully, like I said in the prayer, I know for me, there are times where I can feel like I am stubborn enough that I want to be just well enough to keep doing the things that I normally want to do. And some of those things aren't even all that healthy for me, if I'm being honest. And I know some of you probably feel the same way, but it would be good for us this week to reflect on what it looks like for us to really be well, more than just physically, but spiritually, and how we can actually invite others into that. So we will be meeting again next week, hopefully outside if it allows for that, but I just checked the forecast before I walked up here, and it looks like rain again on that day. So we'll see, and we'll play it like we did today. It's great to be here with you guys, and I just pray that God will bless you this week as you continue to go about what you're doing and be with your families, and that he will keep you well. Thank you.